Chane led them to the fridge in her flat and then pulled out what the police thought was a pizza base, but was instead Michael's face. The pair had not only decapitated Michael, but they had also skinned his face off. Hi guys, it's Bungie and welcome back to my channel where we sit down together every Wednesday and talk about true crime cases from all over the world. Today we're going to be talking about the very gruesome murder of Michael van Eck that took place in Welkom. It's actually referred to as the murder that shook the entire town of Welkom. This case is very high on the gruesome scale. We're going to be touching up a little bit on animal cruelty. We're also going to be discussing the very gruesome details of this murder. There's also going to be slight mentions of the sexual assault of minors. So if any of those things are a trigger for you, feel free to click out and watch my other videos because I'm pretty sure that you can find one that's a little bit more suitable for you. Before getting into the details of the video, as always, I would like to make my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody that I'm going to be talking about in this video and all the families that were and are affected by this case. This video is purely for educational and documentary purposes, and all the information was gotten off the internet and simply compiled into one video. Now that that's out of the way, we're not going to waste any more time. We're just gonna get right into the case. Michael van Eck was born on the 14th of August 1987 to Henriette and Nas van Eck. He was the fourth of 5 children and he was actually the one and only boy. His father worked out of town a lot, and as the one and only boy in the family, he would help his mother out as much as possible. He was the handyman of the family and the protector of the family, especially during the times when his father was out of town. At the time of the crime, Michael was working as an electrician at the Beatrix gold mine. He was a qualified electrician, but he was working on becoming an engineer. He had also recently broken up with his long-term girlfriend, and it was taking him some time to get over the breakup. But after some time of mourning his relationship, he decided that it was time for him to go back out there and explore the dating world, and that's when he signed up to the online dating site called To Go, hoping to meet someone new, and that's where he met Chane van Heerden. The two instantly hit it off, and pretty soon they were flirting and making plans to meet up. Michael really thought that Chane could be his next possible girlfriend, but Chane had ulterior motives. Chane van Heerden was born into a shaky household, and her childhood was pretty unstable in a way. Her parents' marriage was already rocky even before she was born, and just as her mother was making plans to divorce her father, she found out that she was pregnant with Chane, and so she had to stay. They would eventually get divorced though, and so Chane and her 2 siblings would go to live with their mother, Charmaine. Charmaine would get into very unhealthy and abusive relationships with very abusive men who would not only abuse her but would also abuse her children as well. So her relationships were very unhealthy, but not only for her but for the entire family. Chane's father would also get remarried to a woman named Tanya who had a somewhat okay relationship with Chane. Chane was very artistic from a young age, and her favorite thing to do was draw. But when she was around 8 years old, her parents started realizing or noticing that her drawings were of a dark nature. It was not usual for a kid to draw the stuff that Chane was drawing. She would also talk to people that other people couldn't see, but her parents just simply thought that this could be, you know, just imaginary friends. When she was asked who she was talking to, she told them that she was talking to her friend Azazel, but there were many that followed, and one of them went by the name of Norman. So unlike her parents who just brushed it off and thought that, oh, this is just imaginary friends, her grandfather was very worried about this imaginary friend who had the name of Azazel, because he knew that the name belonged to a satanic demon. So it didn't sit well with him, but he couldn't really do anything about it. Chane's behavior was also a little bit odd. At some point she became very scared of the dark, so her mother told her that her dolls came alive at night and they protected her. Instead of Chane sleeping comfortably knowing that her dolls protect her every single night, she actually started tying them up and putting tapes over their mouths every single night. She also stabbed her stepmother when she was about 10, and that's when she was put on mood stabilizing medication. She and her dad had a very close relationship. They just loved spending time together, and one of their favorite things to do together was to go hunting. Whenever they went hunting, it would be Shane's duty to skin the animals. She actually enjoyed skinning a lot, so much that she would actually start collecting dead animals just so that she could skin them. All of this was happening before she was 12. By the time she was 12, she started hanging out with an older group of kids who introduced her to drugs. She started taking drugs at the tender age of 12. She was also raped at this age while she was under the influence, but she never told her parents anything about the assault. Her mother moved to New Zealand with her new husband when Chane was 15, and so she was left with her dad and her stepmother. She would also get into a relationship with a 22-year-old man at this age. Not only was the relationship wrong, but he also introduced Chane to some pretty dark stuff. So he and his friends would do some satanic rituals and activities, and even though Chane didn't do what they were doing, she opted for voodoo instead. Now, I don't know anything about voodoo, but I've heard that voodoo and Satanism is not the same thing. Like, they can coexist and they can be intertwined into one, but they're not the same thing. So I guess she wasn't performing this satanic ritual, she was just doing some dark magic. She was just doing some voodoo, which is not Satanism. I'm not well educated on the subject, but if they are one and the same thing, or if I'm incorrect, feel free to correct me in the comment section down below. At the age of 16, Chane dropped out of high school and she went to a college to study art and design. Soon after graduating, she started dating a guy named Warren, and at this point her family really thought that Chane was getting better. They loved Warren and they thought that Warren was the reason why Chane was happier and feeling better, and so they really approved of the relationship. Warren's family also loved Chane. They thought that she was a sweet, innocent girl. None of them knew anything about her past, but all they knew was that their son was a lot happier with her, and so they also approved of the relationship. Warren also had a friend called Roy who had a spiritual gift of some sort. He claimed that he could hear and see things that other people couldn't, and so unlike Warren's family, who were very infatuated with Chane, he just had a bad feeling about her. He couldn't really put a finger on it, but whenever he was around her, he would just feel this dark energy surrounding her. The name Norman also kept popping up, and so one day Roy decided to pull Chane aside and ask her about this Norman character. Chane was not happy about this at all. She snapped and told him where to get off before storming off. Soon after that altercation, she broke up with Warren without even giving him a reason why, but she was probably just annoyed with the fact that Roy brought up, you know, Norman. It was not long after this breakup that Chane got into another relationship with 24-year-old Maartens van der Merwe. She had met Maartens at a party at Roy's place while she was still in a relationship with Warren, and the two of them instantly hit it off. They just had so much in common that they just sort of clicked immediately. Maartens was born into a rocky relationship as well, and like Chane, his parents had also gotten divorced when he was young. He was a smart child, but he also had some mental health issues. He was reportedly diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 14, and he was given some medication for some of his symptoms, but he would have violent outbreaks from time to time. His illness became known to the community and became the talk of the town, and things became so bad that the kids at school were bullying him about his mental illness, and it just got so bad that when he was 16, he had to drop out of high school. He then started working with his father at his father's wood workshop. At some point, Maartens decided that he was doing so well and that he didn't need his medication anymore, and so he stopped taking it, and he also decided that since he was doing so well, he could finally gain some independence, and so he moved out of his parents' home and moved in with a friend called Roy. So one night, Roy and Maartens decided to throw a party. Roy invited his friend Warren. Warren came with his girlfriend. His girlfriend met Maartens, and the two of them hit it off. The girlfriend in question is Chane, by the way, in case you missed it. Chane and Maartens' relationship officially started sometime in December of 2010, right after Chane's other relationship ended. They bonded a lot over the fact that they had so much in common. They had both grown up under similar circumstances. They both would see things that other people didn't see. And oddly enough, they both had an interest for killing animals, and in Chane's case, also skinning them. They just had a lot in common, and so they bonded a lot over that. I think they both felt like they had finally found somebody who understood them, and so they both unleashed their darkest desires around each other since they both had similar interests. About a month after their relationship started, they decided to move in together, and so Chane moved out of her parents' house and Maartens moved out of Roy's flat. They moved into a flat in Welkom in an area called St. Helena. So once they had moved in together, they were now free enough to bring their dark fantasies to life. Maartens' desire was to kill, while Chane's desire was to watch and then skin the corpse. They bought 2 cats together and then they brought them to their flat where they tortured the animals and killed them, and then Chane skinned them. The craziest part is actually that they took a video of the whole entire incident, and Chane was wearing a white dress as if she was doing some sort of ritual. The couple thought that killing the animals would fulfill their desires. However, it wasn't. They felt like they needed to do something bigger than just killing 2 cats. In February of 2011, they decided that killing a person was the only thing that could satisfy their dark desires. They were both on agreement on that, and so the two of them started planning. Towards the end of March, Chane created a profile on To Go and she made contact with Michael van Eck. I don't really know who reached out to whom first, but they made contact and they quickly started flirting. Michael was finally opening up to the idea of dating again, and so this was genuine on his side. But this was all part of Maartens and Chane's dark plan to lure someone in just so they could kill that person. In fact, while Michael and Chane were flirting, Maartens would be sitting on the couch looking at the messages, and he would sometimes also respond or help Chane think about a response. They were both in it together, and essentially their plan was to lure Michael into their trap. Soon after the two started talking, Michael and Chane decided that it was finally time to meet. Weirdly, Chane suggested that their first date be at the Welkom cemetery, so at a graveyard. The whole idea was alarming and weird to Michael as well, but Chane was somehow able to convince him to agree to meet up at the graveyard. They were going to be meeting on Saturday the 2nd of April 2011. So once Michael had agreed, Chane made a list of all the things that she would need to take with her to this date. This included blades, knives, ropes, and candles. On the day of the date, she put on a white dress, which was actually the same dress that she was wearing on the video where she killed the cats. And then she headed out with Maartens. Michael had dinner with his parents and then told them that he would be taking a girl out on a date. He said that he was gonna fetch her at her home in St. Helena and then they would head to the movies, which was obviously a lie, but how do you even begin to tell a person that you're gonna have a date at a cemetery? Like, I would also lie, but I probably wouldn't even go there. I wouldn't go there. He then took a shower, changed into a pair of jeans, a bluish grayish t-shirt, and then headed out. His mother watched as Michael drove away, and she noticed that he turned to the opposite direction from where he actually said he was heading, but she didn't really think much of it and she just let him be. Chane and Maartens had already set up at the graveyard. They had put a sheet on the floor and some candles and some glasses of wine, a bottle of wine, and made it look romantic, I guess. At around 8:50 p.m. Chane switched her phone off and then headed to the entrance to wait for Michael, who arrived at around 8:55 p.m. They then headed to the area where Chane and Maartens had set up, and they had a glass of wine. They were making some small talk, but Chane wasn't interested in keeping the conversation for long. Pretty soon, she had given Maartens the signal and Maartens arose from the bushes. Michael heard a noise coming from behind him, but before he could even turn his head to check it out, Maartens had already plunged a knife into his back. But Michael had a black belt in karate, so he obviously wasn't gonna go down without a fight. He instantly fought back. At some point during the hassle, Maartens called out to Chane to help him out because Michael was not giving up. He put on a solid fight. Chane then grabbed a knife and stabbed Michael 3 times in the back. 3 times. And then finally, Maartens slit his throat, killing him on the spot. They then dismembered his right arm, left leg, and decapitated him. They put his body parts into some plastic bags and then they dragged him to an area near some gravestones where they dug a shallow grave for him. They only had spoons and knives to dig the grave, so you can imagine how shallow it was. They ended up cutting him into smaller pieces, into more pieces, so that he could fit into the small grave that they had dug up using spoons and knives. They then loaded the plastic bags into the boot or trunk of Michael's car and drove to their flat. When they arrived, they took the plastic bags out of the car and put them inside the house, and then they drove to a local taxi rank where they abandoned the car. After that, they walked back home. So the next morning, on the 3rd of April, one of the workers at the Welkom cemetery rushed to the maintenance office to report what she had seen after spotting a pool of blood that was seeping into the sand. There were more splashes and drag marks near where she had spotted this pool. So the manager rushed to the spot to see this for himself, and he was also alarmed. There was also a blood-soaked rag at the scene, so they decided not to touch it and they contacted the police immediately. Meanwhile, Michael's car had also been found abandoned at the taxi rank. The police ran his license plate number and went to the address that came up. They were welcomed by Michael's mother, who told them that Michael went on a date the day before and that he should be at work by then. She then called Michael's boss, who confirmed that Michael did go on a date, but he also said that Michael didn't show up for work. He, unlike Michael's parents, actually had a lot more details regarding this date. He told them that the date was not going to be at the movies, it was actually going to be at Welkom cemetery. And instantly after hearing this, they were all shocked, and so the police, together with Michael's parents, headed to Welkom cemetery to see for themselves. A bloody t-shirt was found at the entrance of the cemetery, and Michael's parents confirmed that that t-shirt belonged to Michael, and so as you can imagine, their hearts sank. The canine unit, the canine department, was then called in by the police, and the sniffer dogs were able to locate the shallow grave, and Michael's body was carefully extracted from the grave. The right arm, left leg, and head were missing from the body. The dogs then did a sniff test around the cemetery, just trying to locate the missing body parts, but unfortunately they couldn't trace Michael's scent. So now it was completely up to the police to do their investigation and find out who killed Michael, and most importantly, where the rest of his body was. In an attempt to piece together the missing pieces, the police went through Michael's cell phone records. They believed that the last dialed number could belong to his date, and so the lead detective in this case, Detective Nell, called the number. At first, the phone was switched off, which is kind of suspicious, but she didn't give up. She kept on calling and calling and calling until finally on the 5th of April, which was a Tuesday, the phone was answered by a sweet and polite young lady. Detective Nell told Chane that she was a doctor and that this was the last dialed number on a patient's cell phone, and this patient had been involved in a terrible accident, and that Chane needed to rush to the hospital to see whether she could identify this patient. Shane's response was that she was at the shops and that they'd be there soon. The detective did not miss the fact that Chane said we would be there soon. So Detective Nell quickly rushed to the hospital and got other detectives dressed in civilian clothes at the entrance of the hospital. Shortly afterwards, Chane and Maartens walked into Welkom Mediclinic. Detective Nell then approached the couple and told them that there was no accident and that she actually had to talk to them regarding a young man who was murdered on Saturday the 2nd of April. Chane calmly told her that she knew. She claimed that she already knew even before coming to the hospital that this was about, the murder of Michael. She also told Detective Nell that she would tell them everything if only the detective could give her a moment to speak to Maartens, and obviously the detective refused. The two of them were then arrested for the murder of Michael van Eck. They were then put into two separate vehicles and taken back to their flat. Inside the flat, there were some weird drawings and paintings by Chane, which at first glance gave the police the impression that this murder could have been a satanic ritual because the drawings, the paintings were just of a very dark nature. Chane led them to the fridge in her flat and then pulled out what the police thought was a pizza base, but was instead Michael's face. The pair had not only decapitated Michael, but they had also skinned his face off. His lips had also been stitched together. And Chane was just so nonchalant about the whole thing. When she realized that the police didn't know what that was, she just pointed at it and said, his face. Like, she was so chilled about the whole thing. She also pulled out two containers. One of it contained Michael's eyes and the other one contained Michael's ears. So like I said, Chane was very nonchalant about the whole thing. She was chilled. She was not fazed at all. Her angry father came to the scene, yelling at the police, telling them that they had made a mistake. But Chane told him that she did it and that she would do it again. And so at that point, her father loosened his grip and Chane was taken to the holding cells. That night, Detective Nell went home with a massive headache and she couldn't sleep at all throughout the entire night. The following morning, when she got to work, she found a group of police officers gathered outside Chane's holding cell, and so she rushed to go see what the problem was. What she saw was not at all what she expected to see. Chane had cut her thighs open and had bled all through the night. She had used her own blood to write "Along Came a Girl" on the wall behind her. She quickly rushed into the cell to check if Chane was okay, and Chane just silently smiled and pointed to an object on the floor. It was a white object and was wrapped with some hair that looked strikingly similar to Detective Nell's own hair. Chane then asked the detective if she was okay and if she slept well. Refusing to give her the satisfaction, Detective Nell lied. She told her that she slept well, very well, and then she left the cell. Chane confessed to what she and her boyfriend Maartens did in full. She told them that on Monday she spent some hours skinning Michael and that Maartens took a video of the whole entire thing. As you can already imagine, she was emotionless the entire time. They were both charged with robbery, murder, and the mutilation of a corpse, and they both pleaded guilty to all the charges. During the psychological evaluation, it was said that Michael's schizophrenia played no part in the crime at all, and so both of them were deemed fit to stand trial. But Chane refused to take a stand during her proceedings. Psychologists testified that Chane is a danger to society and that she will definitely kill again if released. The social workers also mentioned that the couple was so disturbed individually that when they came together it became explosive. And there was no evidence that this could be a satanic killing or a ritual murder or anything. It just seemed like they both did this just because it's what they wanted to do. It was just what they wanted to do and they went ahead and did it. All the experts agreed that Chane had little hope for rehabilitation, but nonetheless she was sentenced to 20 years for the murder and 15 years for the robbery. The sentences will run concurrently though, so in 20 years Chane might be coming out. But her release will not be automatic. After the 20 years, she will appear in front of a judge again, who will then decide whether or not she's fit to be released. She also happens to be the first female in South African history to be declared a dangerous criminal. Unlike Chane, Maartens decided to take the stand. He claimed that he didn't remember much about what happened that night and that he only realized that he had killed someone a few days after the murder. He seemed a bit more remorseful than Chane, but we must keep in mind that it could have been just an act. He did apologize to the Van Eck family, and he also cried when Michael's mother took the stand. And professionals also testified that Michael's part was not really as immense. It just seemed like he didn't have the upper hand. He didn't do the most horrific parts of the crime, so it seemed like he was controlled in some way or another, or somebody had, somebody being Chane, had the upper hand in the crime. Maartens was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder and 15 years for the robbery. I really think that Chane somehow had the upper hand in this case, but she possibly got a lesser sentence because she wasn't the one who actually took Michael's life. All she did was help decapitate, dismember him, and then skin him, but that's equally as crazy. If it were up to me, I would either swap the two sentences or give them the same exact sentence. The couple kept in contact until the year 2014, when their relationship officially came to an end. Chane is a good prisoner. She studied theology while in prison, and she also teaches art to her fellow inmates. Maartens also got his matric certificate while in prison. It's very heartbreaking to me that they get to continue with their lives when they so heartlessly and so gruesomely robbed Michael off of his. He had dreams and aspirations of his own, and he had so much life ahead of him, but it was selfishly stolen from him by Chane and Maartens just to fulfill their dark desires, or to see how far they could go. My heart truly goes out to his family, and I hope that they have healed from the loss of their loved ones, and I pray that Michael continues resting in eternal peace. This was the gruesome murder that shook the community of Welkom. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, please hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel and watch my other videos, and also comment down below what you thought was the craziest part of this case. I could name a few. I could mention a few. There was a lot of crazy things in this case. You could also watch this video if you're finding it hard to pick, because I know that I have a lot of interesting videos. So to make things easier on you, you could just click here. Thank you once again for watching today's video. I'll see you guys in my next one. Don't forget to subscribe.